Long before the rise of modern nations, before the boundaries of continents were clearly drawn on maps, ancient peoples moved, settled, and built in ways that connected distant lands. Among the earliest and most influential regions in recorded history is Mesopotamia. The Monturturtontediors, Orasti, land between the rivers, Datur, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Located in what is now modern Iraq, parts of Syria and Turkey, Mesopotamia is often celebrated as the cradle of civilization. Here, urban life took shape. Writing systems like cuneiform emerged. Monumental architecture, organized governments, and mathematical systems developed. It was here that the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians built cities that would shape the world for millennia to come. Yet, what is often overlooked is the interconnectedness of this region with Africa. Across the Red Sea and along ancient trade and migration routes, African peoples interacted with Mesopotamian societies in ways that were profound, enduring, and transformative. Archaeological evidence, linguistic traces, and written records point to African builders, artisans, and traders who traveled north and east, carrying skills, resources, and cultural ideas that became part of Mesopotamia's foundations. In this segment, we will explore how African knowledge, labor, and movement helped shape the world's earliest cities, and how these contributions became embedded in Mesopotamian history. To understand these early African contributions, we must step back to the Neolithic period between 10,000 and 4,000 BCE. During this era, human communities across Africa and the Near East were experimenting with agriculture, permanent settlements, and new technologies. Along the Nile Valley, complex societies were emerging well before the unification of Egypt in 3100 BCE. These communities possessed advanced knowledge of irrigation, stone construction, and long-distance trade. Simultaneously, groups living along the Horn of Africa and the Sudanic Belt were developing pastoral and agro-pastoral cultures, moving seasonally and interacting with other regions. Trade across the Red Sea and through the Sinai Peninsula formed a bridge between Africa and Mesopotamia. Archaeological finds from the Arabian Peninsula, including obsidian from Ethiopia, Nubian pottery styles, and early African figurines, reveal that African goods and cultural elements traveled far beyond their places of origin. By the 4th millennium BCE, the rise of Uruk, one of the world's first true cities, created a growing demand for building materials, skilled labor, and technical knowledge. Mesopotamia lacked certain resources, such as hard stone, which was abundant in African regions. As a result, networks were established that brought African materials and specialists into the heart of Mesopotamian city building. Some scholars point to the migration of skilled workers, stonemasons, architects, and artisans, from the Nubian and Horn of Africa regions into southern Mesopotamia. These migrations were not large invasions, but gradual, sustained movements over generations. Through these exchanges, early African builders helped introduce stone-working techniques, canal engineering practices, and cosmological architectural ideas that influenced temple layouts and urban planning in Mesopotamian cities. As Mesopotamian city-states flourished between 4000 and 2000 BCE, their success depended heavily on building monumental structures, temples, ziggurats, canals, and administrative centers. Unlike Egypt, Mesopotamia lacked abundant natural stone. Most structures were built using mud brick, a versatile but fragile material. This limitation created both architectural challenges and opportunities for collaboration. Ancient trade routes linked southern Mesopotamia with the African Red Sea coast via Arabia. Through these routes, stone blocks, obsidian, gold, and specialized labor traveled northward. Written records from early Sumerian temple economies describe the arrival of foreign specialists who contributed their expertise in stone masonry and canal construction. In Uruk, the White Temple, built around 3500 BCE, stood on a raised platform, a forerunner of later ziggurats. Some of its stone foundations were laid using imported material. Analysis of certain blocks indicates geological origins in regions consistent with Nubia and the Ethiopian highlands. While local Mesopotamians were experienced in mud brick, the precision stone cutting visible in some surviving fragments suggests the work of specialists familiar with hard stone carving, a technique mastered in African contexts for centuries. Beyond materials, African builders are thought to have influenced urban planning and hydraulic engineering. In southern Egypt and Nubia, early communities had long managed seasonal flooding through basin irrigation systems, a technique that allowed precise control over water levels. Similar strategies appear in early Sumerian canal systems, indicating shared knowledge or parallel innovation enhanced through contact. By the time of the Akkadian Empire, 2334–2154 BCE, under Sargon of Akkad, Mesopotamian rulers began organizing large-scale construction and military expeditions that extended their influence beyond their borders. Trade with regions referred to in cuneiform tablets as Magan and Punt, often associated with areas along the African coast, intensified. These regions supplied not only goods, but also skilled personnel. African builders' presence is also reflected in iconography and linguistic borrowings. Some architectural terms and deities associated with construction bear linguistic similarities to Cushitic and Nilotic languages. Decorative motifs, such as lotus flowers and papyrus bundles, common in African sacred architecture, began appearing in Mesopotamian temple reliefs. One striking example comes from the city of Eridu, one of the oldest known urban centers. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of layered temple platforms, each built over the previous, representing successive periods of construction. Some of the stone-cutting methods in the earliest layers bear resemblance to techniques documented along the Sudanese Nile, including interlocking joints and beveled block edges. These methods provided greater stability for elevated structures, a crucial adaptation in the alluvial plains of Mesopotamia where foundations could shift. As Mesopotamia entered its Bronze Age, African contributions evolved. Builders from Nubia and the Horn were not simply outsiders. Over time, they integrated into local societies, forming specialized guilds and passing their techniques to Sumerian apprentices. This blending of knowledge produced hybrid architectural forms that combined Mesopotamian religious symbolism with African construction precision. Historians and archaeologists offer various interpretations of the extent and nature of African involvement in Mesopotamian building. Some emphasize long-distance trade and small groups of specialists, while others argue for more significant cultural blending, possibly involving intermarriage, settlement, and shared communities along the Red Sea and Arabian coastlines. What remains clear is that Mesopotamia did not develop in isolation. Its advancements were part of a larger Afro-Eurasian network, where ideas, technologies, and people flowed in multiple directions. African builders brought not only technical skills, but also conceptual frameworks, ways of organizing space, designing temples, and controlling water that were essential for early urban life. Their techniques allowed Mesopotamian cities to build higher, dig deeper, and last longer. Modern scholarship increasingly recognizes that civilizational development was interconnected. Acknowledging African contributions does not diminish Mesopotamian achievements. Rather, it paints a more accurate and richer picture of how humanity's first cities came to be. The involvement of African builders in shaping Mesopotamian civilization had lasting consequences. Architecturally, their techniques influenced the evolution of ziggurats, the stepped temple towers that became symbols of Mesopotamian city-states. Without knowledge of stable stone foundations and water management, these massive structures might not have endured centuries of rebuilding and expansion. Culturally, their presence contributed to the cosmopolitan character of cities like Ur, Eridu, and Uruk. These cities became hubs of exchange, where artisans from different lands collaborated and adapted each other's skills. Over generations, this blending contributed to the technological momentum that allowed Mesopotamian civilization to flourish. Economically, African trade routes helped sustain resource flows into Mesopotamia, supporting growth in areas where local materials were limited. Politically, this interconnectedness helped shape diplomatic and commercial relations between empires and distant lands, setting patterns that persisted into the Assyrian and Babylonian eras. Perhaps, most importantly, these early exchanges laid foundations for shared human knowledge. Techniques carried across deserts and seas became part of the global heritage of architecture and engineering. The story of Mesopotamia is therefore not solely the story of the Fertile Crescent, but also of the African hands and minds that helped build its cities. As we leave the banks of the Euphrates and Tigris behind, it becomes clear that ancient civilizations were deeply interconnected. The stones that formed Mesopotamian temples were not only quarried from distant lands, but also shaped by the movements of people and ideas that flowed between Africa and Asia. Their legacy reminds us that history is rarely isolated. Instead, it is a vast tapestry of connections, where the skills of one people become the foundation of another's greatness.